Welcome to the Pump and Dump channel for another weekly update. This time looking at the Dow Jones, of course, again. Looking at more generally the stock market news, how Trump's declaration of this national emergency of the coronavirus, how it will evolve over time, and what he said during that speech that led to this 2,000 point rise at the end of the day. Of course, beginning of the day it looked like we're just going to keep falling. We're down like a few hundred points, and then somehow the stock market managed to open up 1,000 points, and then it went almost negative, and then it rallied up to being up 2,000 points. So I think yesterday I had mentioned that the Federal Reserve was going to do $1 trillion in QE, buying bonds on the market. And after thinking about that, and seeing also other central banks talking about doing QE, I kind of started thinking about that. When they're buying it in the market, they're going to pay market prices, and you see how the 10-year Treasury is trading at 136 instead of 100. So basically, what the Federal Reserve is probably going to be doing with that 1 trillion is buying these bonds on the market, and that means the bond holders will get a premium to the face value, and that is of course only because the interest rates are lower than the coupon was when these bonds were issued. So the yield has created, it went almost down to, it went below 0.4%, almost to zero, and then it came back to 1%, and you can see of course how the inverse relationship between the yields and the bond price has driven them initially up, and now it's driving them back down, and it might find a support here somewhere and then bounce again, go up higher than that, and then go negative like Trump has been calling for. Now the surprise today for me, of course, was that I expected us to go 3,000 points down, but obviously I was thinking too much about where we ultimately will be, and I just thought it would just happen today, and that was obviously wrong. So of course, like I could say some story about how the narrative changed, and because of what happened, that somehow affected my my call, and my call was right, and blah blah blah. But I think it's just like, in terms of looking at the long term, I still think this has to go down, and I think next week it will just go down to 18,000 on the Dow, because like we went down 10% on Thursday and went up 10% today on Friday, and like when you look at these kind of moves, whether you go up 10% and then down, or down and then up, you always end up with being lower than you started, because like if you think about it, you go down 10% from 100, you go down to 90, and then 10% back from 90 is only 99, so you're always going to be 1% lower than you were to start with. So yeah, looking at the news, so Trump, I think he declared it a national emergency for this coronavirus. Basically, he had all these CEOs standing up there, and they were talking about how they're going to bring product to market to help fight the virus, and Trump was talking in great lengths of confidence of how they're going to win the fight against the virus. And that is a very important statement that he made there, because if you go back to 2001, when the Twin Towers were taken down by those planes and the US declared this war on terror, now we're at the phase where whenever people talk about terrorism and war on terror, people are just like, oh, don't bother me with that. It's like people have become tired of being accused of being a terrorist for listening to conspiracy web or hosts, or looking at websites are putting out conspiracy theories, and that kind of like intimidation is not working anymore. So I feel like over the last couple of months at least, it has faded completely, and I haven't really noticed or seen many terrorist related news articles. So I think that this is like now the new headline, the new story is the war on the coronavirus, or whatever you want to call it, the COVID-19 virus. Basically, what we're seeing are the same trademarks in terms of managing these crises. Back in the early 2000s, we had some I remember in England they had policemen with machine guns walking around on public places, like the rail station. And now we have, like in China, we have these government paid people walking around with these temperature measuring devices, and they're measuring the temperature of people who are walking by, and there's this social intimidation of you need to be afraid of something, be afraid of the virus or be afraid of the terrorists. Like back in the early 2000s, I remember when I was on the bus once, I looked at there was this Arab guy, and I looked at him, and my first instinct was, oh my god, is that guy a terrorist? He's got a rucksack on. Which is stupid, but this is going to be the same thing. It's like some friends of my wife and mine, they already experienced this stigmatism, that because like this lady, she's Chinese, so she was on the bus with her children, and you know, she was like accused by other people of having the virus and spreading it, and kind of crazy. I mean, she didn't come from China. She's like lived here for the last many years, I guess, and ultimately, you know, it was very unlikely she had the virus, but like people were accusing her because she was, you know, Chinese, and that's kind of, you know, the same thing like with the terrorists and Arab people looking at them and thinking they were terrorists. It's kind of like how people react, and this whole war on the coronavirus is going to become the new theme of this maybe this decade. It depends really on how this virus evolves. Some people say it will be with us for a long time and it will mutate, and every year it will come back and it'll be worse than before, and you know, it's like taking like, I don't know, like 8,000 people's lives or something like that globally. And some people say that's like, you know, it's still a very small proportion, but we're still at the early stages of this whole thing spreading. And you know, we could lose like 100,000 or 500,000 people to this year. And in that case, you know, people will be very scared about it, and especially if the markets are just continue collapsing like they are going to do, then that could have, like, you know, a 2000, you know, 2000 and a 2008 like feel to it, where something bad has happened and that justifies everything else being bad. And so yeah, there was of course that by Trump. He talked about that. Then in his speech he talked about how he was going to help the oil producers in the United States. There was this idea floated because he had announced bailouts for the travel industry, the cruise liners, and the pharmaceuticals, I think, that he was going to help the shale oil producers because the Saudis and the Russians want to destroy them. They want to get rid of them. They don't want to cede market share to them anymore, so they're driving the prices down, devaluing their currencies, and that is going to kind of drive out these shale oil producers. So the expectation was that Trump was going to help them. If you look at these stocks like CNX Resources, they produce mostly gas, but they have some oil in their reserve, in their PV10. They had a really a strong move up into the close. That's kind of when Trump talked about how he was going to help them. Range Resources 2, Pioneer 2, and EQT as well. All these other companies had these big moves going into the close. After hours, you can see like with Range Resources sold down to 264. But yeah, the question is, was this move up justified? For CNX Resources, certainly not, because as I mentioned, they produce mostly natural gas. Range Resources produce natural gas, and they also, in terms of the valuation, natural gas doesn't really move the needle on the valuation so much, but what moves the valuation for Range Resources is the oil price, because not only do they produce oil, but they also produce natural gas liquids, which derive their price from the oil price. And so when Trump spoke of how he was going to help them, what he really said was that he was going to buy oil to refill the strategic oil reserve of the United States. And he said he was going to buy, you know, he's going to fill it to the top. And then he smiled and said, that's a very good price. And what is a very good price? Well, he sold the strategic oil reserve somewhere up here in the 50s, I guess. and now he's replenishing it here at a very good price in the 30s, which is, you know, where it's at. So what can really come out of this? Maybe the oil price can rise in anticipation of them, you know, restocking, or maybe it just stays here and he, you know, he purchases it but doesn't like really move much. And that kind of comes down to the final analysis. Does this really help these companies, what he announced? The answer is no, because their problem is not with demand. Most of them are hedged for the first for this year and the next year, some of them too. But what is the problem is for them is that the oil price is too low for them to keep growing, like Diamondback or Pioneer. They need higher oil prices to justify growing their business and growing into justifying the valuation that they have at this point in time. And Trump just saying that he's going to buy oil at a good price in the 30s here where we are now, that is not really going to help them, because him buying is not going to drive the price back up to 50. So yeah, that's where we are at. That is where we are at. Now going into next week, obviously I was wrong today. I thought we were going to be down 3,000. We were up 2,000, so I was wrong by 5,000 points. But I think in terms of the long term, I think we keep going down. One thing here to note is that, and I think I mentioned this, but I kind of, in terms of my conclusion as to what would happen today, I didn't take that into consideration because I was like really focused on this target here, and I'm so sure we're going there. But intraday I was just completely wrong. The thing I kind of oversaw was, or overlooked, was I kind of saw it, but I didn't like pay attention to it, or didn't, you know, take it into enough consideration, is that when this decline happened, we went through the support, we bounced up against it, then we went through this next support, and then we had some news pump that pulled us up, and then we went straight down again below, and then again the same thing. We went through the support, and now we had this news pump with QE from the central banks being announced, and Trump talking about how they're going to win the war on the virus, against the virus. And you know what can happen on Monday is we can just go down again, and Tuesday go down, Wednesday go down, Thursday, Friday. Maybe on Thursday we go up, and then Friday we go down again. But we could go down to this 18,000 over a couple of days. News flow that would justify that, sentiment driven, of course, would be that you know, let's say if we like look at the coronavirus as a driving factor for the sentiment, helping push these prices down and justifying them. We have some known cases of celebrities like Tom Hanks and his wife said they tested positive, like I think a few days ago or maybe a week ago. And then the UK health minister, she tested positive too after she went to Italy and came back. She met with the Prime Minister of the UK, and he, Boris Johnson, he said that he kind of refused to be tested for it, and he met with her, and it's very likely that she infected him. And then the Canadian Prime Minister's wife tested positive, and the Canadian Prime Minister is now self-isolating himself, so there's no assurance of whether he gave it to her or she got it from somewhere else, and whether she passed it to him. I think a few days ago he was standing with some other people doing a speech, so it's very likely you know, if he had it there, he could have infected other people too. But at this stage he's neither confirming nor denying that he has it, as far as I know at least. And then Trump and Pence, they met with some Brazilian official, and he later, when he later tested positive for it, so they might have it. And because it's asymptomatic, as people have talked about on other YouTube channels that are very informative, these people might have it but they don't know it. So we had Tom Hanks and his wife who confirmed that they tested positive. If we have one of these politicians confirming that they are positive, well, that will probably take 1,000 points off the Dow again. If one of these people, you know, politicians or celebrities, are in a critical condition, then we'll lose another few thousand points. and if one of them dies, we probably be down really bad in the toilet, because at this stage, you know, we have like 6, 7, 8,000 or so, as far as I know, that have died from it worldwide, and people say, oh, it's not that many and it's just a number, but you know, once you see someone who you can put a face to his name, or a name to that number in that large number of deaths, you just you feel very different about it. And then when the stock market is collapsing, you'll look at the stock market and say, you know what, this just feels like you know, this is normal that the stock market is going down as people are dying from the coronavirus. You know, like 1 or 2 people that you can put a name to who die from the coronavirus justifies the stock market going down 1,000 or 2,000 points. And yeah, that is really the risk at this point in time. Some people are saying it's all sentiment driven. The fundamentals are, of course, also weak, but in combination, sentiment and fundamentals going in the same direction should lead the Dow to continue to fall. And I mentioned this previously, there's probably, you know, it is a big way down to this 15,000 and 18,000 levels, but like, you know, from 23 down to 18, that's 5,000 points, and then another 3,000 here. And it doesn't really take much to you know, to justify the sentiment for these kind of moves. I mean, something crazy today was that even Disney rallied, even though Disney, they had to close their theme parks, and those theme parks are not going to open again. So why would, yeah, at least in the short term, why would that be? You know, why would their stock rally? It makes no sense. So yeah, I think on days like this, when you see stocks rallying that should not rally, that is usually a very bad sign. And it just suggests that either we are reverting to fair value from being oversold, or it suggests that we are rallying on sentiment and bottom fishing, and people thinking that they, you know, that the crisis is over and there's nothing to worry about anymore, or something like that, and they just jump in thinking, now it's going up, you need to follow the momentum, get onto the trade, onto the bandwagon. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at. The war on the virus, it will probably become one of the headlines at some point in time. We will see. So yeah, I guess that's going to do it. So remember, as always, I'm not giving it financial recommendations, financial advice or recommendations to get involved in these markets, especially at this point in time. It's very volatile for anyone who doesn't know what they are buying and whether they would be willing to hold it if it kept falling. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, opinions, or something you would like to share that I might have missed, or you'd like to correct something I got wrong, I probably get some things wrong when I'm talking here. I'm just going off of my my own way of reasoning, of course, and you know, interpreting what I see in the news. You can always share that, and you know, I never take anything critical in a too negative way, let's say. And yeah, apart from that, if you like the content, you can always subscribe. And with that said, have a good day.